In this lesson, I now want to talk about another important feature of DBT, which is packages. And as it says here, packages are ways to import other DBT projects into your own, and they're often designed to solve specific use cases. So in this section here, we're going to understand what packages are. We'll see how to add them to a project, and then we'll also see two examples in action within our own projects, and we're going to use the DBT utils package to do that. Let's now hop over to the documentation and understand what is a package. And this is going to take a lot of influence from software engineering, like a lot in DBT. And as it says here, the software engineers typically modularize code into libraries. And again, there's that word modular coming up. And ultimately, these are designed to allow programmers to operate with leverage. And ultimately, that means you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Things are already done for you. Let's use somebody else's work to bring it into our own. As it says here, they are in fact standalone DBT projects. So you're really importing another project. And as we'll see here, there's a few different ways that we can add it to a project. The first and most important thing is you need to add another file. This is a new file called packages.yaml to your project. And it needs to be at the same level as your dbt project.yaml. So the root of your actual DBT project. And then within this file, it's another YAML file, and we have a packages attribute here, and then you list the name and versions of your packages. There's a few different ways to specify it. As we'll see here, we're going to use the recommended approach, which is to use DBT Hub. And maybe you're familiar with Docker Hub or some other different tools. They have their own hubs, which are really just central registries for people to host their own packages, as we'll see. So you can pull directly from DBT Hub. That's kind of the default setting, and then just indicate a version. Again, we're going to do this in our example. The other ways to do this are to grab packages stored on a different Git server or on your own Git server. So for example, GitHub, you can pull directly from a Git URL. And it does mention here that we strongly recommend pinning to a specific release. So whether that's a tag or a branch, that's because you don't want to be using something and expecting it to work a certain way, and then all of a sudden there's an update and you don't realize it, and now everything is out of sync. So to get around that, it's very strongly recommended to just indicate a specific version. There's also ways to use private packages within SSH key and or Git token. Frankly, this I have not worked with much in the past. I think this will be a little less common, but there are ways to do it, and you can read through the documentations if you'd like. All right, so let's now take a look at how to use this. So we're going to go to DBT Hub, which is just hub.getdbt.com. And here you can see they have some featured ones, as well as a list of all these other different options. And like it said before, these are all separate projects, and ultimately you're importing them into your own. So the one we're going to look at here is DBT utils, but I encourage you to take a look at some of the other ones. This is created by DBT Labs, and this is just a collection of reusable bits that are very common for people to use. So they've consolidated it all into a package that you can download. And this is how we would use it. So within our packages.yaml, we'll copy and paste this in here and we can use it. There's also a GitHub page directly for this, so we can see the exact project and code, everything that's with it. And all of this is listed here, and it lists it down here as well for a little bit more readability. Again, there is so much here, and you're going to need to pick and choose what you want to do, but I want to show you how to use it. So let's now hop over to our project and see how we can add this. Okay, so I've opened up my project, and I'm going to create a new branch called add packages. And like it says here, what we'll do is we'll add this file packages.yaml. And again, it needs to be in the same layer as dbt project.yaml. So we'll do this here, packages.yaml. And it's going to be as simple as copying and pasting this here, because in our case, what we want is to look at DBT Hub, which is what is inferred here by just writing it this way. And we want DBT utils, which is this one here, which is created by DBT Labs. But again, there are so many other ones that you can use. This is just one example for you to check out. And that's it. We have this here. Now, in order to get this into our project, what we need to run is dbt deps. That's the command to look at your packages.yaml and import all of those projects or those packages. And if we look here now in dbt packages, we can see dbt utils was added here, and we can see all of the source code behind it. We can now use it in our project as if we ourselves wrote it. And you can also see here that it's grayed out, and that's because it's by default added to the git ignore here. So we can see git packages similar to the logs and target, basically so that you don't add it to your own Git version control and things get messy. It just keeps it out of the way for you. All right, so now that we have it here, how do we use it? Let's take a look at some of these examples here. So there are certain tests that you could use. Remember, we created our own custom tests within the project, and they've done a bunch as well. And you can do whatever you want here and just use it now. So let's say we want to do not accepted values, just as an example. We'll click this and it's going to take us to the source here. We can actually go even further if we wanted, and you can see the specific code being written. And we could see this as well in here if we wanted to find it, but let's just assume it works, and it shows you exactly how to use it. And in this case, it is a test, so we would use it like a generic test. It asserts that there are no rows that match the given values. So in this case, it's saying rather than all of these being the only accepted values, we do not want these to be accepted. And you can see the only difference really is you are qualifying the project with the package name dot and then whatever the name of the function is. So in this case, not accepted values, or I should say the name of the macro or the test or whatever it is you are looking at. Let's take something similar here and let's add it to one of ours. So if we go to models, staging, we have one that I think it's under project or products. If we go to our YAML file here, we see we have an accepted values, but let's play around with this just to see this in action. And I'm going to paste this in here. Let's move this over in line, and we could see now we have accepted values and not accepted values. You could list it like this if you wanted, but we'll keep this like this. And what I'm going to do is add video here. Again, this is something that we know does exist, but just for the sake of example, I want to see it fail just to show you. So now this is here, and this is a new test from a different project. Let's see if it works. DBT test, we'll do the selector, and we'll do staging tech store products to test this one only. And let's see what happens. We would expect it to fail. Yep, and there it fails. So it did run DBT utils not accepted. So we were able to use that, no problem, just like that. And if we look at the compiled code, it should compile for us. You can see exactly what's going on. All of this as if we wrote it ourselves, but instead we just used somebody else's code. And let's just add something here that we wouldn't expect. So I'll just say laptops. I don't think that's an option here. We have computers, but not laptops. That should pass, and I'll just leave it like that. Now, the other example I want to show you is it's not just tests that you can use, but you can do a lot of other stuff. So for example, a common thing that people often want to do is create a bunch of dates. They want to create a table of dates to use maybe as a reference, as a dimension table for all of the different dates or anything else. I mean, there's so many different things here. But for example, let's say you want to create a bunch of dates, and this is called a date spine. And you can see here it has its own macro for that in DBT utils. And there's a bunch of code here that you're welcome to look through. You could copy, paste this, and adjust this however you want. But ultimately, it's just going to return a bunch of dates for you. So let's see how we can use this. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to create a new model in here just for this date spine. And this is just a reference. So what I'll do, I'm going to create a new directory here. I'll call this utilities. And within here, I'll create a new file called datespine.sql so that we can easily create our date spine. And all I'm doing is copying and pasting this in here. Again, this is something you could write manually, but why do that when you can just do it through here? And so the start date, we'll keep it 2019. And I'm going to say 2023, the 1st of January, add it. And now let's run it. DBT run, select date spine because we added it as a model. And it's just taking this code and dropping it in here. And again, if you look at the source, it's just going to take that source and drop it in here because it's a macro and we're pulling from DBT utils. So it knows to look in here and it's going to find date spine, which is going to be under here, right here. So that's how this is going to work. All right, let's see what happens. Okay, it's going to create a view. Now let's go back here and refresh. And here's a view of that code. Let's see, and here are all the dates. And maybe we want this to be a table and want something that we can use more frequently. So we can go down here and create utilities and we know the drill. So we'll say materialize table, and maybe we want to give it its own schema as well. Utilities. So in production, it gets separated from everything else. Let's try it again. Okay, now I'm going to refresh. And it should be a table now. And here it is. So in here, it's in our own DBT development, but once we move it to production, it's going to get separated into its own utilities schema because of this here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check in these changes, push it, merge the code, and then resume the video, and we'll just see what it looks like once it runs in production. So go ahead and do that on your own, and then we'll revisit here shortly. Now, perhaps you ran into the same thing, but as I was going through, I did run into an error during the deployment, which is actually the whole point of having this CI check, because it failed. It caught it for us. And the reason it fails is because we need a step now to run dbt deps to install packages during our workflow. So what we also need to do is go back to our workflow files in GitHub and add a step to run dbt deps so that it can use these packages. Otherwise, it doesn't have them in the project and it doesn't know about them. We'll say install packages, and this will just be a dbt deps step. And I'm going to add this not only here, but to this other one as well, because it's the same scenario. And you could add it here if you were going to use it as well. But that is a step that you need because, again, imagine it's starting from a fresh environment. It doesn't have those packages unless you specifically tell it. So I'm going to go ahead and also add these as well. Update workflow with dbt deps. And now that should help us out. But this is good. This is why we have these checks, to make sure to catch ourselves, because without it, I would have missed it. So we're going to let that run again, and then I'll merge it through. We should see it deploy to production, and then I'll resume the video once again. Now, both CI and the deploy to prod ran successfully, which means it should now be in production. And if I refresh here, we should have a new schema. Here we go. And it should just have the dates bind. So this was now moved to production, and you could take a quick peek and you just see it created these days here. And in a normal situation, maybe you want to add day names or month number, or, you know, break it out a little bit more to create a full dimensional table. But if you just want a bunch of dates, this is an easy way to do it. And you may not even need to use this as a table. Perhaps you want to use this same functionality, this same macro, and just put it into a CTE, into a different query that you're using, but now you have all the dates. So there's a lot of ways to use it. Use it however you want. Hopefully now you understand how to use packages in dbt and the value that they bring. There's a lot of features here. There's a lot of options that you can use. I encourage you to come here on hub.getdbt.com and check out all the different options. There's a bunch here. The way I think about it is, if there's something complex that I'm trying to do, before I go down the rabbit hole of trying to build it on my own, I'll often take a quick peek just to see if anybody has built something similar that maybe I can either use exactly and just take their code, or use it as inspiration to build something on my own, you know, take their code and build on top of it. So that is dbt packages, and you should be ready to use them now in your own project.